I picked this as my potential fight of the night. We have Jose Alberto Quinonez El Teco taking on the last samurai, Luis Smolka. Matt, Luis Smolka was one of those guys, and he was just like that song by the Counting Crows, I'm just hanging around. That's all I know of the song. But he was just kind of hanging around.
Cocker in my butt before the fights.
Yeah, look that one up. That's a Luis Smolka direct quote. He likes those fights that pucker up his butthole. But when I look at this one, Luis Smolka was just kind of hanging around at 125. He was having issues with the weight cut. He was just kind of winning some, losing some. But he was always facing decent levels of competition. And for Jose Alberto Quinonez, I look at his UFC run, and it's somewhat puzzling because the names that he's fought, Alejandro Perez, Nathaniel Wood, Sean O'Malley. I mean, those are some halfway decent names. Look at Alejandro Perez. I'd like to see him fight a little bit more. I look at this fight as a weird one because for Jose Quinonez, and the reason why I think this could be a possible fight of the night, he's an all-action type of guy. And for Luis Smolka, we talk about his takedown defense and his takedown accuracy. It's quite poor in the UFC. We're hitting about a third of them, and we're defending about a third of them. But overall, his jiu-jitsu is slippery, and he's coming out of one of the better, more underrated camps that we don't hear enough of in Team Oyama. I know when Joe Rogan's on the call, it's one of those ones that he's definitely going to point out. But apart from that, you don't have a lot of fighters coming from that gym that you really get hammered down week in, week out. So in this fight, it's a very interesting one. And again, that level of competition for Luis Smolka that we talk about, let's go back and have a look at some of those fights, Matt. Because he went on a 3-fight losing streak that saw him out of the UFC. 4-fight losing streak. Brandon Moreno, the assassin baby. Ray Borg, future title challenger. Tim Elliott, former title challenger.
Also fight of the night.
And Mateus Nicolau. Man, straight up, where's Mateus Nicolau at these days?
I think.
But apart from that, Luis Smolka, you lose 4 in a row, see you later. He wins 2 on the regional scene. And I know that there were various reasons as to why. You know, the mental side wasn't there. He was having issues outside of the cage. He figured everything out, picked up 2 big wins, 3 big wins rather, and one of those over Kyle Estrada. And if you know me, you know that for me, Kyle Estrada is that benchmark win that you have to make it into the UFC. Poor Kyle Estrada has faced this level of competition and the losses. Loses to Luis Smolka, Smolka makes it back into the UFC. Loses to Adrian Yanez, Yanez makes it into the UFC. Loses to Kevin Natividad, Natividad makes it into the UFC. Just shouts. Poor Kyle Estrada. But Matt, I think this is a possible fight of the night. I gotta let you take over. Are you on that same wavelength? Are you as excited as I am for this one?
Yes and no. Now, if you followed the Fight Night Nation for as long as hopefully you have, we have theories and different dumb things that we talk about with every fighter, and I have to talk about Luis Smolka and the Luis Smolka effect. We haven't trademarked the term yet, but we probably should. Luis Smolka, phenomenal at jiu-jitsu, but he's a guy who is willing to give away rounds in search of the perfect submission. And it does remind me a little bit of Tyron Woodley's striking style as his career's developed. And weird 2 people to bring up, but hear me out. Tyron Woodley, as he's gotten older, has figured out, okay, I don't need to throw 500 punches a fight. If I wait and wait and wait, kind of like Uriah Hall, and just find that perfect opening, I can end it in 1. And that is really good when you are, a crazy high-level fighter like them. Not to say that Luis Smolka is not a high-level fighter, but just levels. This guy's titles and main events. Luis Smolka off his back, he'll fish for the submission. He'll be trying to get different sweeps and whatnot. But if he doesn't get them, he's more than happy to just remain on his back. And Brian Ortega was a guy who did this. A lot of people remember the first, portion of Brian Ortega's career. He was really just getting 3rd-round stoppages. And if you go back and watch a lot of those fights, he's more than happy to just let guys be in his guard because he knows I can finish them whenever I want to. I'm okay if Brian Ortega does that. Brian Ortega can do whatever he wants on a jiu-jitsu mat because Brian Ortega is basically an adopted Gracie at this point. If you watch his fights, he can submit anyone. Luis Smolka can get the submission, but he's a guy who's been submitted himself. And Luis Smolka, the reason that I just feel like my MMA fandom is so tied to him is the first time I ever saw Brandon Moreno fight, he fought Luis Smolka. It was on short notice, and he was able to guillotine Smolka. And I had held Smolka in such high regard at the time that made me one of the bigger Brandon Moreno fans ever. And Smolka, another guy too, he main evented a show before anyone really cared about the 125ers. A lot of people forget this. He had main evented against Paddy Holohan in Ireland. That was supposed to be like a big Paddy Holohan welcome show. And Luis Smolka had other ideas. So Smolka in the top position is by far my favorite place for him to be in. He does have really underrated ground and pound because when I do think of Luis Smolka, and I do think the story around his career is the submissions are very much tied to his career, but his striking has gotten better, and especially in this kind of second version of him that we've seen in the UFC. Yes, Casey Kenny beat him quite badly, but Casey Kenny, everyone knows how good he is now. The Matt Schnell fight, Craig's a lot hotter on Matt Schnell than I am, but still, losing to a guy like that, there's no shame in it whatsoever. And we have seen those, I will say, at least minor improvements in Smolka's game, because the first go-around in the UFC, it was just wrestling and scramble-based. Now he will kind of work in his combinations to get the takedown, and I do really like that about him.
And I mean, you saw that first fight back against Sue Mutterji, that was a huge win, gets the submission, but again, you saw the improvements in his striking. The fight against Ryan McDonald, a complete performance. Matt Schnell's a tricky one, and again, at that one, he weighed in at 135. It was a fight at 35, but Matt Schnell, he's a flyweight. So that was kind of a bit of a weird one. But I look at this one, and if you look at the stats for Jose Quinonez, this is where it gets squirrely. So we started incorporating the stats into the show, but you have to take those with a grain of salt. You really do, because it doesn't paint a full picture. Jose Quinonez, good takedown average per 15 minutes, good takedown accuracy, 50% takedown defense, not terrible, especially against some really tough fighters, and that's the thing. I mean, you look at Jose Quinonez and the losses, especially so far in the UFC, Nathaniel Wood, the forever prospect, and Sean O'Malley. And O'Malley had a great performance. I mean, Jose Quinonez wasn't able to do anything at all in that fight. So take that for what it's worth. He got hit 18 times, and he got finished. And in the fight against Nathaniel Wood, it was back and forth, and he got submitted. In the fight against Alejandro Perez, he lost the decision. I look at the wins that Jose Quinonez has, and I scratch my head, because he beat Leonardo Morales, no longer in the UFC. Beat Joey Gomez, no longer in the UFC. Beat Diego Rivas, no longer in the UFC. Beat Teruto Ishihara, no longer in the UFC. He beat Carlos Joaquin, who has a fight coming up with Future FFC. Every single guy Jose Quinonez has beat is no longer in the UFC. And the really troubling thing is he beat Carlos Joaquin back in 2019, who's no longer in the UFC. Jose Quinonez has beaten guys that aren't of that ilk. And the guys that he's lost to, even Alejandro Perez, are halfway good. So for me, Jose Quinonez, the wins don't tell me anything.
If he beats Luis Smolka, does that statement still ring true? Because Luis Smolka was cut from the UFC at one point.
No, I don't think so. Luis Smolka is a halfway decent opponent.
You bring up all the takedown attempts and really just the wrestling of Jose Quinonez. I don't think we're going to see any of it in this fight. I think Jose Quinonez is going to be more than happy to just strike on the outside. And as I see Craig nodding his head in my peripheral, I do think Jose Quinonez is a much better striker than he gets credit for. And a lot of that has to do with the Sean O'Malley performance. And we can sit here till the cows come home and talk about Sean O'Malley and his career trajectory and where you think his ceiling is. But one thing he's amazing at is striking. And if you do try to get into a pure kickboxing or a kickboxing version of an MMA fight with him, you're probably going to end up on the losing end. I wouldn't take a whole lot from that fight and apply it to this one just because Luis Smolka, a very different type of opponent. I want to pick Luis Smolka in this fight. I really do. I like his career trajectory. I love the story of him coming back to the UFC after he's kind of conquered his demons, kind of outside the cage. I don't know how he wins this fight. I don't know if he is going to be able to close the range on Quinonez and get the takedown, because if the fight is on the feet, I do like the improvements that Smolka's made in his striking throughout his career. I still don't think he's on that sort of... I would still have him as a below average striker, and especially at range too. He does carry his hands low, and when he throws punches, I mentioned this in the Marcos video, whenever Luis Smolka lands like a 3-punch combination, it always seems like he's eating at least 2 punches for those 3. Not a great ratio. I know he's landing at a little bit higher of a rate, but it's always great when a fighter can be, and I know we're always comparing them up to these high level guys, but a guy like Robert Whittaker, who when he goes in, it's I'm going to land my 3 punches, my kick, and then I'm out of range, and you don't got to worry about it. Luis Smolka is there to be hit. I do like the power of Quinonez. We haven't seen a lot of it in the UFC, but he throws really good straight shots. He's great at catching people on the end of his punches, too. Again, Amanda Nunes, a good example of that. Quinonez, he does have sort of that longer whip on his shots, something that I really like. So I do think Quinonez, the power punching will be able to get to Smolka as the fight progresses. And I do think it will start to accumulate more and more as the fight goes on. And the fight will just keep on shifting further towards Quinonez.
And Matt, if we have a look at the odds for this one, I mean, are you at all surprised where we're coming in? I mean, we have Luis Smolka, a slight favorite, open to -135. The line dropped to about a -175. And now it's come up a bit to the point where Luis Smolka, at an average on best fight odds, -141. For Jose Quinonez, opens a +115, goes up as high as about a +145. He's now evened out, again, +116. And over on Tapology, to kind of add that in and round it out, at a 423 total votes, 82% going Smolka, 57% saying he's going to get the win by decision. That doesn't really line up with what you were thinking, but overall, if you're making a pick on this one, what do you think here?
Jose Quinonez. I think the takedown defense will be good enough. And again, we see a lot of his wrestling offense. We don't see a lot of his wrestling defense because he fights in that sort of Max Griffin style where it's I'm going to strike, but if I get in trouble or if I'm even a little bit uncomfortable, I'm not afraid to shoot for the takedown. He is more than comfortable on the ground. I don't think it's going to be one of those cases where, okay, well, for as long as the fight's on the feet, Quinonez is going to be in control, and as long as the fight's on the floor, Smolka is. I do think it's a much more competitive fight in both aspects. I do think Smolka will kind of get some shots in. He will go for the takedown. It'll be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, but I'm going to pick Quinonez.
I think as long as the weight cut isn't an issue for Luis Smolka, and not that it has really been at 35, but as long as it's not really an issue, again, I do like his jiu-jitsu, I do like his striking improvements, and again, can he land more volume than Jose Quinonez? I mean, if we go by the stats, we're close. I mean, you've got more out of Luis Smolka, but he's accepting more damage. The defense numbers are up for Quinonez at a tune of 66% striking defense to 52% for Luis Smolka. Striking accuracy being the same. The differential a little bit more in the favor of Luis Smolka. So if he's able to really string together some volume, if Jose Quinonez starts to get a little bit frustrated and we start working some of the takedowns, again, you have to worry about the jiu-jitsu of Luis Smolka. I don't think this is one of those fights where we have to necessarily worry about Luis Smolka. Oh, geez, he's fighting Casey Kenny. Watch out for that front choke, or watch out for those things that we typically see in a Luis Smolka fight. Now, we have adopted a term on this guy, so that's a little bit difficult to say. But I do like Luis Smolka in this fight, especially as a small favorite.
I mean, I see where you're coming from, but again, Luis Smolka, we have a term to describe his grappling. And now you're saying you like his grappling. I don't see him getting the submission. I do think Quinonez, fight IQ-wise, is probably a little bit better than Smolka too. And I do like that Quinonez, when he is all the way on the outside, he likes to stay busy. He will throw the jab out there. He will throw the leg kick, whereas Smolka, when he is striking, sometimes he finds himself in these weird kind of periods of inactivity. With Quinonez, if he's been able to defend a few takedowns, if fatigue does start to become an issue for both guys, I do just favor Quinonez as the fight progresses because his striking is going to stay the same. He doesn't need a crazy output. He doesn't need a lot of power to really get the results he's looking for. He's going to be looping combinations together, and if he does get the results in the combos, maybe Luis Smolka goes down, but I am going to pick Quinonez by decision. I don't know if I fully agree with you on the fight of the night potential of this one, but I do think it'll be a fun one nonetheless.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this. I've got Luis Smolka, you've got Jose Alberto Quinonez, and Matt, as the week goes on, maybe things change. Maybe we watch a little bit more fight tape. Maybe something comes out of this one that we're not overly sure of as it stands this Sunday night. So you got to make sure that you check out Fight Night Picks, !kicks later on in the week where we get an opportunity to preview the fights. We get to chat with you in the live chat.
It's a good time.
And it is a pretty darn good time. So make sure you check out !kicks on Saturday. And who knows, things could change and we could change some of our picks. So I'm really looking forward to that. You got to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.